The Man of Steel, Superman.
Superman is known for pretty much being the poster boy of vanilla superherodom.
Oh, I'm sorry, I embarrassed you, didn't I?
Oh no.
He's got the airtight morals, chiseled good looks, and the perfect American cowlick. But that's just one version of Superman. You may not have seen them yet, but we found 10 versions of the most normie superhero that are anything but normal. Here are the 10 most left field versions of Superman.
Calm down, friend. We have to stop Luthor, but we don't have to be mean. Get out of my way, imposter.
Super Duper Man. While this is not exactly an official version of Superman, he is certainly a certain type of version, and he's also very important for the history of comics. As the first ever superhero parody in a Mad magazine, Super Duper Man by Wally Wood has inspired decades worth of similar parody comics in Mad, but also more serious stuff, like the iconic work of Alan Moore. Moore said of Super Duper Man that at age 11, he remembers being so knocked out by the Super Duper Man story. It became a huge touchstone in both his detailed art style, but also the critical way in which he looked at mainstream comics. So what's all the fuss about the version of Superman with a ridiculous name and some unnatural proportions? When you read it, it's easy to tell. Wally Wood nailed a type of parody that's close enough to the original that it reveals what's so ridiculous about it. Super Duper Man's civilian name isn't Clark Kent, it's Clark Bent. He works as the assistant to the copy boy at the offices of the tabloid The Daily Dirt. He's described as an incredibly miserable and emaciated looking figure who shuffles from spittoon to spittoon. When he goes into a phone booth to change into Super Duper Man, he doesn't just turn into a blur and emerge in the new costume. First, he accidentally goes into a phone booth that's occupied and a woman screams at him to get out. He then goes into the next booth and takes off each piece of clothing one at a time, taking so long that a huge line forms outside until he finally emerges as Super Duper Man. He looks pretty much exactly like Superman, except for a few little details. Instead of a classic S on his shirt, Wood puts a different slogan or logo on his chest in every panel. There's Yale University, a Body by Fish ad, a For Rent sign, and even a fabric care label that says 100% wool. As far as his superpowers and abilities go, they're pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is how he uses them. For example, he doesn't use his X-ray vision to find villains, he uses it to peep at the woman in the next door powder room. Lois Lane dismisses him for being a creep, which he most definitely is, asking to smell her perfume. Even when he comes to her later on and reveals that he is in fact Super Duper Man, she says, yeah, still a creep. This, of all things, ends up being the moral of the story, and the final sentence of that first strip. Once a creep, always a creep. Amish Superman. This is a weird one. Superman is one of the biggest names in American pop culture. He's like the superhero version of Coca-Cola. But in a Justice League series called The Nail, Superman was raised in total seclusion, away from the pop culture he's come to represent. In The Nail, he's raised Amish. The reason the series is called The Nail is because of one rusty nail. Jonathan and Martha Kent are driving to check out the spaceship where they would presumably be finding baby Kal-El among the wreckage. Then they drive over a nail and get a flat tire. Because of the delay, another young couple beats them to the side of the spaceship, and, this being the Midwest, they just so happen to be Amish. The couple brings him home and they raise him according to Amish tradition. As you could probably guess, this becomes a problem for Superman. Since he can hear and see things farther away than any human, young Amish Superman picks up on the giant battle that's raging between the world's superheroes and a group of unstable Kryptonian clones. Although he's supposed to be practicing the pacifist ways of his adoptive parents, he feels conflicted. These clones were made in his image, and so he's the only one who can stop them. But if he goes after them, he'll be forsaking everything he's ever known. As he says in the comic, "My senses detect sights and sounds from miles distant." For months, I've been tormented by the evil I perceive. So Amish Superman becomes un-Amish and joins the fight against evil, which, of course, leads to the demise of his Amish parents. Although you might expect that would push him back into his old pacifist ways, it does not. Instead of following the communal rules of the Ordnung, he goes all in as Superman. Tarzan Superman. Now, Amish Superman is strange, that's for sure, but he's got absolutely nothing on Tarzan Superman. In what has to be the strangest crossover idea ever, Tarzan and Superman come together in Sons of the Jungle. Bizarro. Every character has their dark side, and in comics, every character needs a separate character to be the dark version of them. In Superman, that character is Bizarro. Bizarro was first invented in 1958 with the intention of creating a mirror image of Superman, a villain who would actually go toe-to-toe with someone so all-powerful.
Leave me alone.
For every power that Superman has, Bizarro has the opposite one. Superman has heat vision, Bizarro has freeze vision. Superman has super breath, Bizarro has vacuum breath. Superman can see through anything except lead, while Bizarro can only see through lead, which might be the worst superpower ever.
What color underwear am I wearing?
Just like Superman is a too-perfect, one-dimensional good guy, Bizarro is a one-dimensional villain. He's ugly, dumb, and he's mean. The Black Superman, who's also a president. Calvin Ellis was introduced as a version of Superman from a different Earth in 2009, inspired by the inauguration of Barack Obama.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
It was a big step for representation in comic books to have a black character who not only is Superman, but also the president. Although his publication history is limited to the one series Final Crisis, there have been whispers that Michael B. Jordan would want to star in the Superman disguised as the president movie. Bruce Wayne Superman.
Where's Bruce?
It's fun to imagine how this one came about. There's probably a room full of writers spitballing ideas, getting tired, maybe getting a little goofy, and one of them says, probably as a joke, okay, how about this? What if Superman was Batman?
Does he look bigger to you?
At this point, you can probably guess how the origin story goes. Kal-El crashes to Earth, but instead of crashing in the fields of Kansas, he lands on the estate of Thomas and Martha Wayne, who take him in and raise him as their own, naming him Bruce. But when their lives are ended in front of their super-adopted son, he decides to be Batman. It gets better. Lex Luthor, after falling into a vat of chemicals, even becomes the Joker. Shogun of Steel. At this point, you can probably guess what's coming. Instead of landing in 20th century Smallville, Kal-El's spaceship lands in feudal Japan 700 years ago. Conveniently, a bunch of other members of the Justice League also happen to be in 14th century Japan, and they team up to fight another Kryptonian who also happens to be in 14th century Japan, the Shogun of Steel. Kingdom Come Superman. The Kingdom Come version is not as outrageous as some of the others. This version of Superman is just depressed, and with good reason. After the Joker kills Lois Lane, another so-called superhero named Magog decides to take justice into his own hands by killing the Joker. Magog is put on trial, where he's eventually acquitted. Superman, with his very high morals, can't abide by such a decision, so he goes into hiding in the Fortress of Solitude. After 10 years, he re-emerges with a touch of gray and a bad attitude. Superman Red, Superman Blue. Back in the 60s, Superman tried to use a kryptonite-powdered machine to make himself more intelligent. It works, but it also has the unintended consequence of splitting him into two versions of himself, one red and one blue. Because there are now two of them who are both super intelligent, they solve all the world's problems and settle down, one of them with Lois Lane and the other with Lana Lang. Overman. There have been a lot of weird ones on this list, but this may take the cake. So instead of landing in 14th century Japan or an Amish farm, this time Superman lands in Germany in 1938, where the fascists in charge of the country took the powerful baby under their wing, reverse engineering the technology of his spaceship to win the war. Once he grows up, Herr Overman is unfortunately completely down with the genetic putrefaction ideology. He calls himself Overman for Nietzsche's Übermensch and even puts a stylized swastika on his chest. We did not see that coming. The way the comics explain this away is that it's all happening on Earth 10, a utopia built on human suffering. Sheesh, that's a lot of outrageous spin-offs, but there will definitely be more in the future. What's your ideas for the next weird version of Superman? Go nuts in the comments and make sure to subscribe to The Binger for more.